Okay, we've begun recording. Vivian, over to you.
Okay, thanks so much. And I do see people still popping in, but I'll get going. So welcome, everybody. This session is really the final session in our Academic Integrity Week. It's a leftover from last week. And as you know, on Wednesday, there was the academic strike for Black Lives, and our session was scheduled on Wednesday, so we rescheduled it for this morning. So I'm really happy that so many people have been able to come today as well. So my name is Vivian Howard, and I'm currently one of two Associate Vice Presidents Academic. But in my former life, I was Acting Dean and Associate Dean Academic in the Faculty of Management, and I was an Academic Integrity Officer for, I honestly have lost count of for how long, but it was probably at least 8 years in management. So I've got kind of an interest in the topics around academic integrity from both sides, as an instructor, as a former AIO, and now in my role as ABPA. And we've assembled a great panel who are going to be addressing various issues related to technology and academic integrity. Oh, I was an AIO for 44 years. That definitely corresponds with my recollection as well. It was a lifetime. Anyway, we've got two wonderful representatives from our sort of technology side here at Dalhousie. Brian Lesser, who is Manager of Educational Technology and Design in the Faculty of Agriculture. He's going to be talking to us about Urkund, which is one of the tools that you have access to in Brightspace. And Marc Comeau, who is our Director of Academic Technology Services, will be talking about Respondus Monitor. So those are two tools that everybody can use. They're in Brightspace. They're not perfect. So we're going to be talking about what those tools are, how you can use them, what they're good for, and what maybe their, some of the weak spots are, just so you're aware of how to rely on those tools. The second two speakers are two faculty members, Tom Duck from Physics and Rohan Maitzen from English, who are going to be talking about some of the tools that students can rely on and sometimes over-rely on when they're preparing assignments. So really, we've got a presentation that's kind of in two parts. First two talking about tools that every instructor can use. Second two presentations talking about tools that students sometimes get into trouble for misusing. So before we get going, I did, and I should have done this at the very beginning, I did just want to acknowledge that Dalhousie University is located on the traditional territory of the Mi'kmaq and the fact that we are all treaty people. I just wanted to remind everybody that the session is going to be recorded, that your mics are muted, and please use the chat function to ask questions. We're quite a big group. We are about 100 right now. So what I think I'm going to propose is, put your questions in chat, but I think we'll hold answering the questions till everybody has done their presentation, just so we don't run out of time and, everybody has a chance for their full 10 minutes, which isn't a lot of time anyway. So I think we will get going right away with Brian Lesser from Faculty of Agriculture, who is going to be talking to us about the originality checking software Urkund. So Brian, I will pass it over to you.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Vivian. And thank you for the invitation to speak. I'm happy to chat and share some thoughts on Urkund. So as Vivian mentioned, Urkund is our plagiarism prevention and deterrence software. So we're going to talk a little bit in the next few minutes about, how it does that and whether or not it's effective at that. But basically, Urkund, it does smart text matching. So it's basically analyzing student documents, looking at the text within their documents and trying to find out, does that text exist elsewhere, either on the internet or, in a journal or somewhere else. It also, when we say smart text matching, it does have some intelligence in terms of looking for synonyms, looking for rewordings and things like that. So it's not just looking for exact matches. And the big note I want to just highlight before we get into more detail is that Urkund is really intended to assist your own instructor intuition. It's not going to replace. So perhaps, you know, as an instructor, you could see if a student has submitted something that seems far beyond their capabilities, even though Urkund perhaps maybe didn't pick that up as an issue for you to flag, you know, instructor intuition is still going to be the best detection of these types of issues. So Urkund is checking across 3 different sources. I mentioned the internet as one source. So, you know, public sites that are found that you can Google, Urkund will check against that. They also mention that they check some special private sites as well. So some essay mills and Course Hero, certain sites like that that are used in academia. They've sort of decided, you know, to infiltrate, so to speak, and get behind the scenes of those kinds of sites, so that students who try to use those types of sources would also be detected. In the middle, we also, Urkund is looking at publisher databases. So they mention relationships with Cengage, IEEE, Taylor and Francis, Wiley. So their list of publisher relationships continues to grow. It's grown quite significantly since we first started using Urkund about, I think it's about 4 years now. But I just want to mention it's not 100% coverage. So they don't catalog everything that the Dal Libraries has a subscription to. So we just need to bear in mind that, you know, there are some journals and some publishers that aren't captured by Urkund. And then the third source is the Urkund database. So any submission that comes into Dalhousie that's being checked against Urkund, it's going to be stored in the Dal institutional database. By default, that database is just shared or just checked within Dal. The student does have an option to make their paper available for checking outside of Dal as well if they wish. But definitely by default, any submissions to a Dalhousie course will be checked against future submissions. And I mentioned some other schools. So like I say, students have the ability to make their papers available for checking. So students from other schools who have made their papers available would be picked up in detection. So in terms of implementing Urkund, you know, it's available to any instructor through your Brightspace course. And the way it operates is you would add a widget to your homepage. So I'm not going to get into the details of how to do that because time is limited today. But just make note that you just need to add the Urkund widget to your homepage. And there are 2 versions of the widget. So there's one version that is only visible to instructors in the course. So if you'd like to enable Urkund and do some document checking and look at those reports just yourself, you could use the instructor version and the students wouldn't be able to access the reports. The other version is open to anybody who's in the course, so they would be able to go and look at their own reports after you've released those reports to them. So you can turn on Urkund at any time. So even if you have an assignment Dropbox that has submissions on it, or maybe you're partway through the course and you decide to enable Urkund, you can enable that integration at any time for any Dropbox. And just one note is that, you know, sometimes at the end of term, when there's a lot of submissions and a lot of activity, sometimes it can take a day or 2 days to receive the report back. So not necessarily a tool that you could use for instant reporting, but we have chatted with the company and they're working to improve that turnaround time and add extra capacity. So I think, yep, that's it for my slides. That was a very brief overview, I know. But just to kind of summarize, Urkund is doing smart text matching of student documents, and it's looking for phrases and sentences that are found elsewhere on the internet. So, and as I also mentioned, it's not 100% surefire detection. So, it doesn't replace the instructor's need to read and analyze those documents themselves. But what it can do is give you, a place to start. Gives you, if you enable it for an entire Dropbox, you'll see all submissions, and you'll be able to see the students sort of ranked by the percentage of text that is copied. So very important that you can enable Urkund and use it, but still apply your own intuition and your own analysis to these documents.
Okay, that's great. Thank you so much, Brian. And I'll just remind everybody, if you have questions, please pop them in the chat. And at the end of the session, after everybody has had a chance to talk, we'll come back and deal with the questions. But I just want to make sure that we watch our time carefully. So in the Q&A, I know we've already got one question for Brian. If there's others, please just pop them in. So next up is Marc Comeau from Academic Technology Services, who's going to be talking about Respondus Monitor.
Hi, everybody. So just wanted to chat a little bit about Respondus Monitor. So this is new for Dal. We implemented this just right around March when we started our move to remote teaching. So we had been using Respondus Lockdown browser for quite some time, for many years, and Respondus Monitor sort of works hand in hand with that. Broadly speaking, virtual proctoring sort of sit in three categories: either fully automated, automated with human review, or a live proctor where someone's actually watching. So Respondus Monitor is a fully automated one. So basically the way it works is when a student goes to start up their exam after it's been set up properly, if they don't have it installed, if they don't have Lockdown browser installed on their computer, it'll prompt them to install it. And then when that kicks in, it locks the browser so that they can't open new tabs or go to other websites. They can just go through this process and then through the exam. The student presents their ID to the camera, and then the student has to sort of show their surroundings by lifting their laptop and moving it around. And then on through the exam, as the student proceeds, video is recorded of the student, and it'll flag anything excessive eye movement, looking off screen, off into the distance, noises like somebody coming into the room, other things like that. After the exam's complete, at the faculty member side, you get a little bit of a report, and it'll give you by percentage how likely it was that there were no problems in the exam. So I did a fun practice one just to see on the weekend. I got a 99% certain there were no issues. And it gives you a whole bunch of, it gives you the full recording to view should you want to, but I imagine no one would ever want to do that. And then it gives you little snapshots as to jump to certain time periods in the video to notice anything that the system has flagged of those previous behaviors. Now, one thing that's important to know about these things is that they can be circumvented. These are meant to be deterrents. They're not meant to be a catch-all solution that's absolutely going to guarantee everything. One of the reasons why I went through a practice exam this weekend was to basically see how easy or difficult it would be to cheat. So, for example, for myself, and you can find this stuff online, so I'm not divulging any great secrets, but I had a piece of paper stuck to right in the corner of my laptop between the keyboard and the screen, which the camera can't see. And so I just sort of held it in place as I showed around. Now, the idea behind this being a deterrent is if you're a student, you know, the risks are high and it is recording. And so if that page slips down and is seen by the camera, you know, it's a real problem. And so it is meant to be a deterrent in that way. But I think it's really, really, really important that people understand that this is not a foolproof technology. A little bit of quick Googling will show you that there are a number of ways that the crafty student can work their way around it. So at the end, it's up to the faculty member to sort of go through these reports and actually try to check all those flags, and that can become work intensive at the faculty end. So you know, and then it becomes a question of what's an actual issue versus what's not. You know, some of the things I was doing as I was taking my exam was looking off to the clock on the wall. And, you know, if you're looking at it as a faculty member, okay, the person looked off screen, but it was just for a second and then they look back, you don't necessarily know what they were looking at. So there are lots of issues with this, but it is a strong deterrent. Now, one of the things we've been doing is we've been advising people to avoid using the virtual proctor and to go with alternative assessment instead. And basically, it's for all of these reasons that, you know, these are not bulletproof, and alternative assessments, you know, if you work with the Center for Learning and Teaching, they can help show you what that might look like for your specific course. And you're more likely to be able to get better results out of that than sort of doubling down on technology for the virtual monitoring. Even the live proctors where there's a person watching, you know, you're still going to have these issues where it is possible to cheat these things. So that's a big, broad overview, and we'll get to some questions after we're all done.
That's great. Thanks, Mark. And I see, you know, people are popping questions in the chat. So if you have other questions related to Urkund or related to Respondus Monitor, please just put them in the chat and we'll come back to them at the end. Our next presenter is Tom Duck from the Department of Physics and Atmospheric Sciences. And originally, we were planning on doing this session on Wednesday, as you know, and Tom was definitely committed to participating in the strike for Black Lives Matter on that day. So he submitted a video, and then when we rescheduled the entire presentation, we thought he did such a great job with the video, we would just use the video, even though Tom is actually here. So if you have questions for Tom, he is here. He can answer those questions at the end, but we thought we would use his excellent video in which he talks about his experiences as a physics prof with the website chegg.com. So let's hope technology bears with us and we are able to do this. And for whatever reason, the link does not seem to be coming up, but have no fear, I can bring it up in another screen and try doing that. Suzanne, would that be the best thing to do?
Yep, you can try sharing.
Okay, because for whatever reason, that doesn't seem to be working.
You might need to stop sharing the PowerPoint and then share the other.
Okay.
Through share content, through the little box and arrow at the bottom on the right.
Hello.
So it would be share application screen instead of share file. So
okay, so hang on. Let me go back. Okay, so tell me again what I'm doing.
If you've got it ready there, go to the little box with the arrow at the bottom.
Right. Okay,
Yep.
so share
application screen. Yeah.
And then go to the video. Okay, are you seeing the video by any chance?
No, you probably need to stop sharing the PowerPoint first.
Oh, okay.
And if all else fails, Brian and Mark are here, who are way more expert on collaboration than me.
Okay. So how do I stop sharing the PowerPoint? That is my question.
Just a little, here, I'll do it for you.
Okay. Okay, there. Now, go back to share files, share application screen.
Yeah.
Are you seeing it by any chance now?
No.
You have to select it, Vivian, and then click share in the bottom right. And there's also a little checkbox to share your audio, computer audio.
Okay.
You need to click on the actual box in the window too. That was not intuitive to me.
Okay. What box in what window?
So if you click on application window and then click on the box in the window before you click share.
Okay.
Is that video, is it uploaded on a website, like a URL?
It's, well, on the PowerPoint, it is a live link, and it worked before, but for whatever reason, it doesn't seem to be working in Collaborate. I'm just trying to, I'm looking at all the options that are appearing on my screen.
Vivian, I'm wondering, can you send it to Brian and then he would have it and he could put it up?
Sure, I will do that.
You could email me the PowerPoint really quick. I could share.
Yeah, doing that. Well, I'll just emailing you the link.
Okay.
Sorry about this. It's always technology. Okay. Okay, just sent it to you, Brian.
Okay, perfect. Okay, folks, so I'm going to share now.
It's worth waiting for. It's an excellent video.
Thank you for your patience, everybody.
Thank you for your patience. Carry on. Talk amongst yourselves.
Okay, can everyone see?
Yes.
Hopefully.
Fantastic.
Thanks, Brian.
Hello, my name is Tom Duck, and I'm a professor in the Department of Physics and Atmospheric Science. I teach Physics 1290 Introduction to Physics in the winter term. I am here to tell you about the Pay for Answers website, Chegg. For $14.95 per month, students may submit their problems to Chegg and get solutions. All of my homework problems are already up on Chegg, and if you are teaching at the introductory level in the science or engineering curriculum, it's highly likely that yours are too. Let's look at the mechanics of how students use Chegg. After logging in, we go to the Study menu and select Expert Q&A. Notice that they advertise answers to your toughest homework questions. We then click on Post a New Question. I made up a new question for this demonstration. A sphere with 3 kilograms mass hangs from a string of 1.2 meters length and mass 0.8 kilograms. What is the wave speed on the string? After selecting physics as the topic, Chegg asks, why wait? Your question may already be answered. And indeed, there are similar problems already in Chegg's database. I still want to post a new question, and so click through. 9 minutes later, a solution was posted by a Chegg expert. Here it is. The solution isn't quite right. The expert forgot to account for the mass of the string in the problem. The string would have been better described as a steel cable. Notwithstanding, in my experience, most of the answers provided by Chegg are correct. As we have seen, Chegg provides facilities that allow problems from a student's homework to be posted. Problems may be submitted in text as I showed, or posted as an image. Posting images makes the process very efficient. The problems are immediately sent out to the network of Chegg experts, which is operated from India. Handwritten solutions are posted in minutes, as we have seen. This has had a significant impact on learning in my class. In 2018 and 19, I decided to try something new. I assigned students homework problems and asked them to submit solutions. My expectation was that students would do their own work for fear of getting caught cheating. That was naive. Many students copied solutions from Chegg verbatim and handed them in for marking. A great many more were using Chegg to help them through to answers. Students themselves estimate that anywhere from 80 to 100% of students are cheating in their courses and mostly on homework. Students who aren't using Chegg can easily obtain answers from students who are. I am also well aware that students share Chegg accounts. Chegg has ended homework as we know it. The problem, unfortunately, is not limited to homework. It also affects online exams. Here is the solution to one of my 2020 online final exam problems on Chegg. Here is another, and another, and another, and another, and another. In fact, nearly all of my online final exam problems were posted to Chegg in 2020, and often multiple times. If you are teaching an introductory course in science or engineering, it is a pretty safe bet that all of your online exam problems were posted as well. Chegg use is undermining the integrity of our exams. For this reason, I tend to view Chegg as an existential threat to online education. Chegg has no brakes to prevent students from using their service to cheat on exams. And why would they? Here is a funny, interesting story. My daughter and I were watching NHL hockey videos when suddenly she exclaimed, "Did you see that?" We backed up the video and there it was, advertising on the boards of an NHL hockey game for Chegg. Chegg knows their audience and has the resources to reach them. So, what can we do in the face of this threat to our students' educations? Quite a lot, it turns out. The most important principle is that opportunities to cheat should be eliminated. Here is how I accomplish that in my class. In Physics 1290, I eliminated marks for homework. I still provided homework as usual, but there was no grade component associated with it. Eliminating marks for homework takes away any incentive for purchasing solutions from Chegg. Before I attempted this approach, I consulted with many colleagues. I was warned about the potential impact on exams. Fortunately, these impacts never materialized. Students performed about the same as they always have on my exams. This didn't surprise me. Students largely weren't doing the homework anyway. They certainly weren't learning anything from copying Chegg. Eliminating marks for homework also removed a significant source of stress for students. So this is the approach I will personally take from now on. Opportunities to use Chegg can be reduced for online exams by having time limits. In Physics 1290, students were only given 2 hours to write the final exam, and they all had to write at the same time. Keeping students busy reduces the time they have to search Chegg for answers. We also delivered our exam in 8 sections, with one section at a time at random. This required students to complete one section every 15 minutes, which isn't particularly compatible with Chegg's turnaround time. This approach also has the benefit of making it nearly impossible to collaborate. What doesn't work? Honesty pledges. I have heard this recommended repeatedly and see no evidence that honesty pledges make any difference. It is still important to have them, however, so that students cannot say to academic integrity officers that they were not duly warned about the rules. Now, you aren't going to win any popularity contests taking these kind of approaches. Students complained to my chair, to my dean's office, and to engineering. They even went so far as to launch a change.org petition with false claims and predictions of doom that never materialized. Notice that the count of signatories continues to increase nearly 2 months after the exam. Seems sketchy. Once problems are posted to Chegg, professors still have recourse. Chegg is an honor code with a section for professors that states, in part, if you have concerns that students may be using our products inappropriately, Chegg is here to work with you and address your concerns. We will cooperate with any official investigation by an academic institution. To open an official honor code investigation in conjunction with an academic investigation, the request must come directly from the office of the dean or the body in charge of handling matters of academic investigation at the university. Now, I have a colleague who followed these instructions, and Chegg was true to their word. They not only removed the offending content, but they also provided subscriber information. In other words, who posted the questions. I was surprised to learn that Chegg would expose their customers, and I would guess that students are largely unaware of this too. Let me conclude my presentation with a few thoughts. Chegg, I hope you are convinced, is undermining students' educations and poses a huge threat to what we do. To this point, however, there has not been a concerted effort by the university to solve the problems that Chegg poses. The current academic integrity framework is ill-equipped to deal with the kind of mass cheating that Chegg drives. We need both the senior administration at Dalhousie and especially Senate to engage with these challenges. But professors need to take Chegg more seriously as well. Chegg use has become widespread in the student body precisely because many professors won't bring cases to their academic integrity officers. This puts honest students at a disadvantage and places them under enormous pressure to cheat themselves. We need to eliminate this pressure to cheat. So, thank you for listening today. I hope this talk has been informative and not too preachy. If you have any questions or comments that aren't addressed, please feel welcome to email me at tduck@dal.ca.
Great. Thank you so much. And thank you, Brian, for helping get that video playing. And even though Tom invited you to email him, he is here, and hopefully we'll have time to ask questions at the end. And I know he's been responding to questions in the chat. So I am now going back to sharing slides. And I'm just going to quickly flip to our next presenter's slides. There we go. Rohan Maitzen from the Department of English. It's your turn.
Great, thank you very much. I'm going to start with an overview of red flags for plagiarism in the kinds of assignments that I mostly deal with, which would be English essays. And then I'm going to say just a few things about what I think are the causes of this kind of plagiarism and why I'm skeptical about technological tools as a big supporter of academic integrity. So once upon a time, plagiarism meant students had to go to the library, and this meant it was very easy to spot those bright red flags. You would get a sudden increase in the sophistication or the complexity of the student's work, and that would at the very least prompt a kind of conversation with them about what had changed. Today, however, students, of course, are much more likely to go online than to the library. And the main sources of plagiarism that I'm familiar with would be the ubiquitous euphemistically called homework helper sites like Shmoop or LitCharts or SparkNotes, and also, of course, Wikipedia. Students also go to custom essay writing services, which might be big corporate essay mills, or they just might be individuals who've hung up a shingle and offered to do students' work for them. And I am also finding an increase in over-solicitous relatives helping students a little too much with their work, and again, creating some of those red flags. So the red flags today still include sudden dramatic improvements in the quality of a student's work, and that's the most common thing that sets you off. But you also find assignments that are off topic or don't directly address the actual requirements in the instructions, and this can really be a red flag that the student is using what they found and not something that they came up with. Also, assignments that are really overly literal, too much paraphrase or plot summary, and this reflects the rather limited nature and low quality of the sites that they're turning to for assistance with their papers. Also, if you see interpretations that seem kind of sideways to what you talked about in class, especially if it's an argument that's made by multiple students, again, a red flag that suggests they have found this somewhere and are using it rather than are coming up with it themselves. Finally, we also find red flags can come up in the metadata or the format of the document. And if you want more information about what those look like, we can address those in the Q&A. But all of these can be symptoms that a student has opted to download their workload. I do find that the red flags are more subtle today. So material from the kinds of sources that students are consulting may not at first glance seem that different from what a weak student or even a modestly competent student might find. They're kind of blandly correct. So they don't jump out the way use of, say, an academic monograph would. Students also know enough to tinker with the sources that they find, which can make them hard to spot if you just search for a phrase or a sentence online. And for obvious reasons, custom written essays can be especially difficult to spot or to prove, and that's where things like the metadata can be really valuable. In my experience, the technological tools are not that great. As was already mentioned, Urkund is not 100% reliable and in fact has not spotted any of the cases that I've brought to the AIO in the last few years. So given that it is, I think, impossible, even with a great deal of effort, to catch every case, every violation of academic integrity, it has made me think a lot about just how hard exactly I should be trying and how hard I should be, or how much I should be depending on technology to do that. And I see two big problems with trying really hard to detect plagiarism. The first is a practical problem. One is just how much time it takes, especially as our classes get bigger and the responsibility for working plagiarism cases rightly rests with the instructor and not with the teaching assistants. It becomes very burdensome as a task. It takes your time away from aspects of teaching that you might much rather be spending your time on. But maybe more important, I think, is the problem of principle. We all agree academic integrity is important and we want our students to understand that, but I don't think that good pedagogy can come from suspicion. It comes from trust and it comes from collaboration. So this has got me thinking again about what to do and maybe whether we can be thinking more about the causes of plagiarism than catching it or the consequences for it. So just briefly, in my experience, there are three main reasons why students plagiarize, at least in English classes, and they really boil down to panic, insecurity, and indifference. And each of these causes requires a different response, and none of them, I think, are really technological ones. Indifference is maybe the hardest one to cope with. I think we all try to win our students over to convince them of the intrinsic value of the work that our classes ask them to do so that they won't want to cheat but will want to engage with it themselves. But there are always going to be a few who just want to get the course credit as easily as they can, and often that has to do with their priorities, not with anything that we're saying to them or doing to them. So now I'm trying to be just extremely pragmatic and point out that if they do the math, an honest F will be better for them than the 0 that they'll get if they're caught plagiarizing. For panic, I think we just have to try to do everything we can to make sure students are not sitting down the night before an assignment is due, freaking out and going online for help. So this includes really focusing hard on the process, which again, I think in writing classes, we all try to do this. I'm just trying to step up how explicitly I do. So that means scaffolding assignments, coaching students in the steps that it takes to get to the goal that we're talking about how they should manage their time, again, so they're not sitting down the night before in a panic, and building in as many opportunities as we can for consultation and support. When it comes to insecurity, I think a lot about something that I heard from Justin Roberts, who of course has sat in on hundreds of academic integrity hearings. And he told me once that he hears many versions from students of, I did the reading and then I went online to find out what to think about it. And I can't stop thinking about that comment myself. And I really want to catch the students in that moment before they go online. So I've been trying to figure out what it is that puts them in that position. And I think it is because they are so anxious about their grades, many of them, and they are accustomed in many cases to working with very detailed rubrics, which I think is a process which discourages exploration and risk-taking. They also often assume that there are, even in English classes, right answers that we are just kind of keeping from them, and they mistrust the open-ended process of analysis and inquiry that we're inviting them to participate in. And under those circumstances, with the anxiety and the mistrust of the process, it is very tempting for them just to try to Google that right answer. So my goal at this point is really to try to build confidence in the process, to help them believe that they really can and should be coming up with their own ideas, to point out that if they don't know the material well themselves, they can't even evaluate the sources that they find when they go online. And I want them to trust that I'm there to help them, not to police them. So I guess my final comment, and I realize that this sounds perhaps a little bit idealistic or naive, so we can talk about that too if you want, but my feeling is that the best tool we really have for addressing academic integrity is the personal relationship, the pedagogical relationship that we have with our students. And in that context, one of my concerns actually about the shift to online teaching is that it might be harder to establish the kind of authentic pedagogical relationships that we really need when we're using technology for every aspect of our teaching. How do we build that kind of personal trust and authenticity in our relationship with our students to really help us and them address academic integrity as a problem? So I'll stop there.
Okay, that's great. Thank you so much, Rohan. I think that's a really great way to end this discussion and to launch into the Q&A. for the whole 4 presenters. So what I'm going to do is just go back into the chat and draw up any questions that we haven't addressed in the chat itself, just so we have a chance to get to those. So going way back to Brian's presentation on Urkund, you've got a question saying, maybe later, can you please talk about if students can check Urkund reports without the instructor publishing the reports or without the instructor seeing the report? So in other words, can a student go in, submit their work, run an Urkund report, see what the finding is, and then take that assignment back before submitting it to the instructor?
Yes, so just to address that quickly, there is a setting in Urkund, when you're enabling Urkund for a particular Dropbox, there's another setting whether or not the student gets to see the report as soon as they submit. So I have seen some instructors make a Dropbox available for students to submit their reports or submit their documents. They get to see the report, make any revisions necessary. And it's actually a fairly recent feature that Urkund will recognize that it's the same student submitting revisions, so it won't match the prior submissions. It will recognize that it's the same student and not match the earlier draft. So yes, that is an option to have that available. Aisha is wondering about where is this option, and I'm just going to share my screen very quickly. And you should hopefully be able to see it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so this right-hand column here, display similarity report to students upon submission. You would enable that for whichever Dropboxes you would like.
Okay, that's great. Thank you, because I know that can be really useful for students to do that pre-check. And now we've got a question about Respondus Monitor. So this is a question for Marc. Question is, can you choose which activities are flagged? For instance, if it's an open book test, don't mind if the eyes are leaving the screen.
So no, you can't choose the flagged activities within the system, within Respondus Monitor. It is possible to do that with live monitoring. But yeah, it's not something that the automated systems can do. You can change what's required at the authentication stage where you're asking the student to show ID in terms of what you may or may not want to have in place there to verify identification. But that's about it.
Okay. And another question for you, Marc. And this is a question, I guess, really maybe drawing into some doubt how effective Respondus Monitor is. This person says, I've been testing it out as well, and it didn't flag me picking up my cell phone, holding it in front of the camera. This person turned on their TV in the background, and the noise was picked up on the recording, but not flagged. So it kind of raises some questions about the overall efficacy.
So one of the things that our team encountered in our early testing was exactly that, but we were testing very short 5-minute quizzes. The system needs about 20 minutes of data to be able to generate the flags so that it can tell what's a normal thing and what's not normal. So if your test instance was any shorter than 20 minutes, there's a very high likelihood that that's what the issue was. It just didn't have enough data to test that. But yeah, with myself, I took mine and I spent about a half an hour in front of the computer, and it picked up quite a few small things.
Okay, thanks. And another question for you, Marc, before you leave us or turn your camera off. This is the question about whether Respondus Monitor has a high requirement for internet bandwidth. Does it work if the students are taking exams outside Canada?
Yeah, so they don't actually specify exactly how much bandwidth is required. They do just say broadband. So it's a pretty vague term. In terms of it being used, it can be used anywhere in the world as long as there's sufficient bandwidth to get it across. But it is a very reasonable concern. As a student, when you go to it, there's a speed check right there that it actually tests your bandwidth speed in the moment. And it'll give you sort of a graph from red, yellow, green kind of thing, whether you're okay or not. So the student will fairly quickly be aware if there's an issue, but as an instructor, it's going to be very difficult to predict whether students will have an issue or not.
Okay, and then another Respondus question. Does Respondus work with all web browsers? And are there any compatibility issues with Chromebook?
We haven't hit any issues yet. It works with the major browsers. I think Chrome's preferred. Chrome tends to be generally preferred by most of our tools. So a Chromebook shouldn't be an issue. My brain's turning because there's another one that we looked at where it might be, but not with this one in particular, because the work's all done at the back end. So yeah, we haven't run an excessive amount of exams using it, because again, we've been discouraging it, but we've yet to encounter any kind of technical difficulty of that sort yet.
Okay, that's great. Thanks, Mark. And there was a lot of Q&A in the chat about Chegg. And I think Tom, because he was not presenting live, but was presenting on the video, was able to respond to most of those questions. I don't know if there's any that are outstanding. Tom, is there anything that was asked that you'd like to comment on in particular?
I think I touched on them all, but I would just continue to flag Chegg as a major threat to what we do. So many professors, we had a faculty of science meeting where we talked about this problem, and a lot of people felt there wasn't, in fact, a lot of cheating on their exams. But my experience tends to argue otherwise. So I strongly encourage people to look at Chegg, see if your exam appears there, and plan ahead for next time.
Yeah, no, that's great, and your suggestions were really excellent. And I'll just highlight Bob Mann. Bob, of course, is the manager of discipline and appeals for Senate, who is commenting in the chat that Tom Duck's work on this has been outstanding, and not without a great deal of personal effort and frustration on his part. Many professors don't know this is happening in their courses, and we're fortunate to have Tom sounding the alarm on it. So, you know, all of the effort that you've made, Tom, and also the commentary around how cooperative Chegg is once you highlight a concern, that they are willing to provide the names and email addresses of students who have submitted this material. That's
Vivian?
really helpful to know. Yep.
I just see there's a number of questions that just popped up right now about the mechanics of searching for your own exam and problems on Chegg. So maybe if I can just quickly comment on that. There are a few different ways you can do it. First of all, to search for a problem on Chegg, you do not need an account. Okay, so you can go to Chegg and you can just do what I would normally do is just plug in probably the first sentence of my problem, and normally it just pops right up. You just do this in their search bar. You can also use Google, and in particular, if your exam was just a couple of days ago, Google is very effective because you can specialize Google to narrow down on specific date ranges. So we often use a mix of those two different kinds of approaches to find our problems on Chegg. Now, if you actually want to see the solution, then you need to purchase an account. And I've held my nose and done that a couple times, because sometimes for academic integrity proceedings, it's important to actually have a copy of the solution. This is where, as a university, we need to do better. We should probably have people, at least at the faculty level, who are responsible for collecting evidence from Chegg, as opposed to all of our different professors purchasing accounts. We don't need to fund Chegg any more than they're already being funded.
I'm assuming, and this is maybe a question for Brian and/or Mark, Urkund would not pick up anything in Chegg, I'm assuming?
I don't know the answer to that. It's possible that Chegg is one of those special sites that Urkund has established either a formal relationship with or a sort of clandestine undercover relationship. So that would be an interesting test, is to find some sample problems, put them through an Urkund submission, and see if Urkund returns and that it's been copied out of Chegg.
Yeah.
A quick comment on that.
Yeah.
I haven't looked into it in too much detail, but I noted that Chegg has its own plagiarism detector, which of course is available to students and gives them a means to evade tools like Urkund.
So you know how that works, Tom?
I know you can submit your essays to Chegg. I haven't looked at it in detail because we don't do essays in my class,
Right.
but I know you can submit your essays to Chegg, and they have automated tools that will go through it and see if you've plagiarized anything.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I know that that has been a concern for some instructors about making the draft feature of Urkund available, or whether or not you should allow students to upload a draft of a paper to see the report, because on one hand, that could be a learning experience for some students. You know, they need to double check their citations and make sure that they've done things properly. But for other students, it's a chance to say, oh, this got detected. I need to change a few more words so that it comes back with a lower percentage. So Tom raises a good point that some of these tools, even though they help us maybe identify plagiarism, it also, the students can use it to figure out how to not be detected.
How to evade. Yeah, no, it's a good point. And I would say, you know, generally speaking, you know, quantitative courses like physics, and I know in the Faculty of Management, some of the quantitative courses there have also run into issues with Chegg. It is just more challenging because if the answer is correct, it's hard to know always if a student did it correctly on their own or if they did it, you know, if they managed to download the workload by using a site like Chegg. So it's a particular challenge, and plagiarism software I don't think is particularly good at picking up those issues. Just going back into the chat a little ways, we've got a question about whether it is possible to essentially ask Chegg for a blackout period to not post something during a particular time frame. So if you're giving an exam, to ask Chegg to black out these particular questions for a period of 2 or 3 hours. Tom, would you happen to know the answer to that?
I've never tried that. I'm skeptical that they would do that for you, but I haven't tried that. Yeah. Again, this is something where it would honestly be better if we had people at a higher level dealing with a problem like that, contacting Chegg and saying, "Look, we need this for our university." I really doubt they're going to listen to the little people, but people at a higher level in the administration, I think, might have more success.
Okay, thanks for that. And a couple of questions for Rohan. Rohan, you mentioned in the chat something about contract grading in writing classes, and now we've got a follow-up question. Could you explain what contract grading is?
Yeah, I can just say a little bit about it because I know time is short. Basically, the idea is that you develop a contract with your students and they have to fulfill basically a quantity of work rather than being graded qualitatively throughout. So it would be on a satisfactory, unsatisfactory basis, and that really lets you emphasize process. Again, if they go through all the steps and they keep practicing writing, eventually they arrive at a point where they've done enough satisfactory writing to have earned the grade that they contracted for, or to have fulfilled the contract up to a certain point. It's sometimes also called specifications grading. So I haven't tried it before, but I've read quite a bit about it recently, and one of the incentives there obviously is that it frees students from trying to guess, as they often feel, what does the professor want? What does an A paper look like? And there's a lot more subjectivity in our grading than we usually like to admit. Research has shown that professors will often give very different grades to the same paper. So this is a way of trying to address that by focusing primarily on process.
That's great. And there's another question for you, Rohan, and that is, you know, that final point you made, which I think is a really interesting one, and it actually came up quite a bit in the sort of wrap-up Q&A session on Friday, and that is that whole issue of how to develop a strong pedagogical relationship with students in that online environment. And on Friday, we had quite an interesting discussion, and some people felt it was actually easier or certainly no harder. Other people, you know, didn't agree with that. So, you know, just any thoughts around how you can go about establishing those relationships?
Well, I should say I am absolutely new to online teaching, although I've always had online components through Brightspace and Blackboard and so forth in my courses, but I am not new to online communities. So what I'm hoping is that I can draw on some of what I've learned as a longtime blogger, as someone who's been on Twitter a long time. What do we know there? And I think what we know is that trying to be as far as we can, authentically ourselves is the most useful thing, right? You don't present yourself in sort of a small academic box. For instance, if you're on Twitter, you might share family information, a few personal photographs, you talk about your hobbies. What you do is you're showing people on the other side of the computer that you're a real person. And I feel like anything we can do to do that in, well, for us now in Brightspace is going to be essential. So maybe small welcome videos, places to talk within the course space that are not specifically for course information, but are maybe a little more flexible, like that hallway conversation. Anything we can do so that they don't feel they're turning their work into a robot, but they're turning it into someone who's really invested and present and enthusiastic and wants to learn with them. And I have forged really meaningful relationships online with people I've never met in real life to this day. So I know it can be done. So I think you just have to believe in it and project that conviction and try to really be present. And I hope that turns out to be true.
Yeah, one of the conversations we had on Friday, I think it was actually Justin Roberts who made the point that, in a traditional classroom, often it is, we're looking at the 20-80 rule, 20% of the students do 80% of the talking, and you get to know that 20% well, but the other 80% maybe not so well. Whereas in an online classroom, it does to some extent level that playing field, that you can hear from more students and have more interaction with them. And I think, generally speaking, students seem quite eager to form those kinds of communities in the online space. So, it may turn out not to be as difficult as we anticipate.
No, I think that's a really important point. I love class discussion, but if I'm really honest with myself, I hope it's better than 2080, but I think that it's still, it's never 100% of the class participating. And so I shouldn't be naive in thinking that I'm doing everything right in the classroom. And maybe the students who are a little slower to come up with thoughts or would prefer to mull things over or look things up before they feel confident to speak, they'll find online opportunities to contribute maybe more comfortable for them. They're a little more shy, or they're a little more anxious in a rapid fire class discussion.
No, I think that's a really good point. And that's been my experience when I've taught online. I do hear from students who in face-to-face classes that I've had with them have been very quiet, end up participating, in a different kind of way. So that's great.
And just one more quick thing about the Respondus discussion. I mean, I understand the pragmatics behind this, and the Chegg stories are appalling also in other ways, but I just find the whole idea of online teaching increasing our surveillance of our students really disturbing. And I guess I don't have a perfect answer to how we deal with that, but the idea that your computer is tracking your eye movements and where you're looking when you're trying to think and trying to do your work, it really seems to me, again, contradictory to the relationship we really hope to have with our students. And I guess I just don't want to forget that, just because Brightspace can do all these things and can count all the times they log in, and I don't want to rely on those things. So again, at the risk of sounding naive or idealistic, I hope to continue treating my students online with trust as far as I can. I've often been disappointed. I had lots of plagiarism cases, but I prefer to stay disappointed than just to get cynical.
Yeah, no, I think maybe that's a great way to end this session. So I think maybe we'll stop at this point. I see our time is up anyway, but that is a really positive way to end the session. And thank you. I think that's a good reminder of that essential relationship of trust with our students. So I'll thank all presenters in this session. Thank you so much, Brian Lesser, Marc Comeau, Tom Duck, Rohan Maitzen. Thank you for contributing to this, and thank you to everybody for coming. It was a really interesting discussion. Thank you so much.
Thanks very much, Vivian.
Thanks, Vivian. I'm stopping the recording now.
Okay. So thanks, everybody. That was really, really interesting. Great discussion in the chat as well.
So the recording is made available after a little time to put it together, if we wanted to send anybody a link to it, or...
Yeah, Suzanne would know that.
Okay.
There, Suzanne's still here.